Section 14.1, the first part, graphing sine and cosine functions. All right, so just like with any other graph, what we need to know first is what does the parent graph look like? If we don't change anything, what is the shape of this graph? So I've graphed here the sine function is going to be this curve that goes through the origin and curves this way. The cosine is going to curve. It's not going to go through the origin. It's going to go through the one value. Now these are your y values are listed as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and your x values are actually the values of pi, because we're going in radian degrees. We're measuring in radian degrees. So what we've got here is the domain of both of these functions is all real numbers. So that means that with the going the x direction, we can go as far as we want. So this actually will continue to repeat and continue to go up and down at the same rate. The range, meaning the y values, are from -1 to 1. So in the parent graph, the range is just, it's going to go down to -1 and up to 1, and that's going to be where it stops. So you won't go higher or lower in these original parent graphs. The amplitude is half of the difference of the maximum and minimum. So what this means is the amplitude is where it's the absolute value is what it is. So we went up to 1 and down to -1. So the amplitude is just 1. We're going to go 1 either positive or negative. So that's what we mean by amplitude. All right. These functions are periodic, which simply means that they repeat. So they're going to go, it's going to be the same thing over and over and over and over. And a cycle, and when we talk about one cycle, it means just one set of what repeats. All right. So what I've drawn is one set, and I actually drew it over the x-axis, over the y-axis. But actually, this, if you would start at 0, then what happens is you would end here, and so one cycle would end here. And one cycle here would start up at the 1 value, and it would end over here at 2 pi. The period is one horizontal length of that set. So each of these is going to be 2 pi. The period is going to be 2 pi. And the reason we get this is because 2 pi is all the way around the circle. And so that's how we get all the way around all of the values. So that's where that comes from. All right, so let's do some of these. Let's graph some of these functions, and I'll talk you through what we do with each part. So if we've got a function y equals a sine b of x, so now this changes it. It's not just always going to be sine of x or cosine of x. What we've got with either, if we're multiplying the sine or multiplying the value of theta, what we've got is the amplitude, or how high and how low this graph is going to go, is going to be affected by the number that you multiply by your sine. So the amplitude simply comes from this a value, and it's just the absolute value of a. So that's how high and low your sine graph, your sine curve is, or your either sine or cosine curve are going to go. And then the period, or how the length of that, the length of this curve is going to be affected by the b, or by the value that is multiplied by theta. So that's going to be determined by 2 pi divided by whatever this b value is that you've multiplied. And both of these are by the absolute values, because we're going to go positive and negative. So we're going to go up and down. So we just take the absolute value. So let me show you what I mean, and let's do a couple, and then you're on your own. Here we go. So if I want to graph the function y equals sine of 3x, I'm going to first look for the amplitude. How high? Where am I going to start? So the amplitude of this, of sine, is determined by a. And this a is not, there is no a, it's just 1, right? So a is 1, so the amplitude of this graph is just 1. So we're going to go up to 1 and down to -1. That's going to be, we're not going to go above or below that. All right. The period, so how long is this? Where does it cross the axis? This one is affected because we've multiplied by the x, the theta. So we've got period of 2 pi over the absolute value of b, so the absolute value of 3. So the period is 2 pi over 3. So what we're going to do then is it's going to start, and now we've got a sine curve, and the sine curve, remember, starts at the origin. So we're going to start at the origin. We're going to go up and down to 1. So we're going to start off going positive. We're going to go up, and we're going to end, our period is going to end at 2 pi over 3. So we find the end point is 2 pi over 3. All right? Are you following me? So this is the beginning and this is the end of one curve. So it's going to go up to 1. It's going to go through the x-axis halfway there. So halfway between 0 and 2 pi over 3 is going to be what? Is that pi over 3? All right. So this is where it's going to go back through here. So our minimum and our maximums are going to be 1 and -1. So we're going to have a point here and a point here. And then it's going to be halfway through. It's going to come back halfway is where it's going to cross that x-axis. So this point here where we're at our maximum here is going to be halfway between 0 and pi over 3. So this is going to be pi over 6. And we're going to reach our minimum halfway between pi over 3 and 2 pi over 3. So half of pi over 3, or half of this distance is going to be pi over 2. So now what we've done is we're counting by pi over 6's. So this is pi over 6, this is 2 pi over 6, which reduces down to pi over 3, 3 pi over 6, which reduces down to pi over 2, and 4 pi over 6, which reduces down to 2 pi over 3. So this is where we get our values, and then we simply graph. We're going to go through here, we're going to go through here, and we're going to end there, and we're done. Okay? All right. So once you find the amplitude, that's going to be your top and your bottom, and then your period is going to be your left and your right. How far do you go before you repeat? And then you find halfway between is going to be where the curve turns, and then halfway between each of those is going to be your minimum and maximum. Now that's with sine. With cosine, you're going to start at your amplitude, and let me show you that. Okay, so the amplitude of this is still, even though we have cosine, the amplitude is still affected by the coefficient of our sine. So we've got, or of our cosine in this case. So we've got amplitude is absolute value of A. So the amplitude is just 3, which means 1, 2, 3. And now our graph is going to look the same because my values are different. But we've got 3 and -3 are our amplitude. So that's as tall and as low as it's going to go. The period is going to be, okay, well, how far do we go? And I probably should have moved this over so that I had more distance, and I think I actually will do that. Sorry. Rewind. Listen to the lovely music while I just change the graph here. Here we go. Okay. So now we've got 1, 2, whoa. Let's make them a little bigger. 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. -3. Okay. So that's our amplitude. Now our period, how long is this curve going to be? Well, that's going to be affected by the b, which is in front of the x, and there is no b, so that's just 1. So this is just going to be a period of 2 pi. All right? So what you'll do is you'll mark, well, let's see. Here's 1 pi here, and here's 2 pi here. So then we need the distances between each of these. So halfway between 0 and pi would be pi over 2. These are much easier numbers to deal with, huh? And halfway between pi and 2 pi is going to be what? This is pi over 2, so this is pi, so this is 2, 3, oh my goodness, 2 pi. All of a sudden I can't, 3 pi over 2. There we go. Whew, okay. 1, 2, 3 pi over 2. Okay. Then you have to determine, well, this is a cosine curve, and the cosine curve starts at the amplitude and not at the origin. So the cosine curve is going to start at the amplitude, and then halfway through it's going to, did we do this right? Yes. So it's going to go down to the intercept, and then the next point is going to be the amplitude going downward, and then back up here, and then end right up there at the amplitude. And then so you're just going to graph it, and there is your cosine curve. All right? So the differences are the sine curve is going to start at the origin and then go up and then down and then end at the end on the x-axis. Yes, the x-axis. And the cosine is going to start at the amplitude, it's going to go down, and then it's going to end back up at the amplitude. So they're exactly the same curve. Sine and cosine curves are the same except that they're shifted. All right? So they start their cycle. The sine curve starts the cycle at the origin, whereas the cosine starts up at the top of the mountain and goes down. All right? Okay. Whew. So the things that affect it are the amplitude is affected by what's in front of your trig function, and the period, how long that curve is, when does it end? When does the cycle end? That's affected by the b value, or what's multiplied by your theta. All right, good luck. See you soon.